They don't let interns explore the lower floors of the Vatican. That's the rule they emphasize the moment you're selected. No wandering, no touching, and above all, no entering doors without names. But curiosity, like sin, has its own gravity. I was 21, working under Father Cagliari, a silent man with paper-thin skin and trembling fingers who always smelled of candle smoke and salt. He rarely spoke, but he watched everything, especially the hallway near the black confessional. They called it that because it hadn't been used in centuries. An obsidian booth, tucked behind a deteriorating tapestry of the Archangel Michael. The other priests said it was sealed shut after a man burst into flames during confession. A metaphor, I assumed, until the night I heard a voice whisper from inside it. It happened during midnight archive duty. I was cataloging obscure papal decrees when I noticed the tapestry swaying, though the air was still. I stepped closer. That's when I heard it, a whisper, breathy and broken. "Help me." I froze. The voice was neither pleading nor human. I can't explain it clearly. It was like hearing a memory spoken through water. I pulled back the tapestry, trembling. The black confessional loomed behind it, its polished wood covered in Latin carvings that shimmered faintly. The door creaked open. It shouldn't have. Inside, on the floor, lay a small iron key tied to a ribbon of white hair. Not white like age, white like ash or snow under blood. I shouldn't have touched it. But the moment my fingers brushed the key, the world around me felt denser. The chapel bells rang off time. The flickering wall sconces seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. I hid the key in my coat and left. I didn't sleep that night. When I closed my eyes, I saw marble wings drenched in tar. I dreamt of voices singing in reverse and a cage that breathed. The next morning, I found a folder placed silently on my workstation. No label. Inside were a dozen yellowing photos, dated 1883 to 2020. Each one showed a different priest standing before the same iron door in the catacombs beneath the Vatican. The Latin caption below them all read, "Ad lumen captivum," to the light imprisoned. It was the same Latin phrase carved into the black confessional. I asked Father Cagliari what it meant. He didn't speak. He simply raised his sleeve, revealing a burned symbol on his forearm, a 7-pointed star inside a birdcage. Then he said quietly, "If you've taken the key, you have 3 days before they hear you. You mustn't open it." I didn't know what it was, but I planned to find out. The Vatican has many doors. Most lead to libraries, reliquaries, or prayer chambers. But there are others, doors without names, buried beneath floors no one speaks of, guarded not by keys but by silence. I found one of those doors 2 nights after I took the key. The symptoms began the next morning. When I looked in mirrors, my reflection blinked a moment too late. My shadow would stretch against candlelight in unnatural directions. And I started hearing music, dissonant hymns, whenever I touched the iron key. I returned to the archives after midnight, guided by instinct more than intent. Something about the phrase, "ad lumen captivum," pulled me. I moved past the manuscript shelves, into the restricted wing, an area forbidden to all but senior clergy. I shouldn't have had access, but the lights flickered as I passed. Doors that should have been locked clicked open in sequence. It was as if the place recognized the key, or the thing it was tied to. At the end of a narrow stone corridor, I found it, a door made of black iron, embedded into the wall like a scar. No knob. Just a small keyhole at the center, surrounded by 12 inscriptions in a language I didn't recognize. Letters that shifted when I stared too long. The air was cold, far colder than any stone should be. Above the door was a carving of a chained halo. The key in my pocket felt heavier, warmer. I stepped forward. The moment I inserted the key, the hallway lights went out. Behind me, I heard a whisper. Not a word. Just breath, raspy, hollow, close. When I turned, no one was there. But in the dark, I felt watched. The door didn't open like a normal door. It receded, sinking into the stone, revealing a downward staircase lit by hanging lanterns filled with black wax. The air smelled like old feathers and rust. As I descended, the walls became stranger. Frescoes of winged figures chained to thrones, their eyes gouged out, bleeding light. Some were weeping. Others had no faces at all. I saw another symbol carved again and again, a 7-pointed star inside a birdcage, the same one burned into Father Cagliari's skin. After 15 steps, I arrived at a chamber that pulsed with a strange warmth. In its center stood an altar carved of bone, covered in parchment pages, torn, ink-stained, and humming. But what caught my eye was the room beyond it. A massive space, surrounded by columns shaped like feathered limbs, and a series of cages suspended from the ceiling by golden chains. Each one glowed faintly. Each one held something with wings. I thought they were statues at first, until one of them turned and looked directly at me. At first, I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. The cages were immense, each big enough to hold a horse, yet hanging from the ceiling like grotesque chandeliers. Their bars were made of a dark, glassy metal that shimmered with an oily rainbow sheen. Every cage had a number etched into its base, and faint symbols glowed along the chains. I counted. There were 12 cages in total, arranged in a circle. Most were silent, the shapes inside barely moving, but one stood out, cage number 9. From that cage came a melody, soft and hypnotic, rising and falling like a tide. It was a song without words, but it carried both grief and something darker, an undertone that felt like a threat. I was drawn to it, unable to resist, my feet carrying me across the cracked marble floor. Inside cage 9, I saw what could only be called an angel, but not like the ones from paintings or Sunday school stories. Its wings were skeletal, each feather thin and razor-edged, moving as if caught in an unfelt breeze. Its eyes were obsidian pools, reflecting the lantern light in shifting patterns. Its face looked almost human, but too perfect, too symmetrical, like a mask sculpted by a mad god. When our eyes met, the music stopped. The silence was immediate and absolute, as if the air itself froze. Then it spoke. Not with a mouth, but straight into my thoughts, every word a painful chime reverberating inside my skull. I know your name. The voice was layered, both masculine and feminine, ancient and newborn, echoing with something that felt like endless mourning. My knees buckled. I gripped the bars of cage 9 to steady myself. I know why you're here. The voice continued. But do you? I couldn't answer. My mind was clouded, filled with images I didn't recognize. Visions of burning cities, shadows falling from the sky, and a key floating above an ocean of blood. The angel's wings stretched inside the cage, brushing against the bars, sending sparks of light scattering across the chamber. Each spark lingered, floating like dying fireflies before winking out. I looked around the room, realizing the other cages were stirring now. Shapes shifted. Feathers rustled. A soft chorus of breathing, ragged, desperate, rose like wind through dead trees. Something in me knew I had to leave, but I couldn't. The angel's gaze pinned me in place, its eyes boring into mine with a mix of rage and pity. I have waited for you, the voice sang inside my skull. You are the first to come without a leash. The door at the top of the stairs slammed shut on its own, a deep metallic thud that echoed across the chamber. I was trapped. The moment the heavy door sealed shut, the flickering torchlight dimmed. It was as if the room itself took a breath, or held one. I backed away from cage 9, heart pounding so loud it nearly drowned out the whispers. Yes, whispers. Dozens of them, not from the angels, but from somewhere inside the walls. Chanting in Latin, almost imperceptible, looping like a cursed lullaby. I spun around, searching for another exit, another opening, anything. But that chamber was designed for one thing only: observation. Or maybe, communion. Suddenly, a panel in the stone wall hissed open, revealing a narrow tunnel lit with a sickly blue glow. I hesitated, but a deep instinct told me to follow. And somehow, I knew this wasn't a trap. It was an invitation. I entered the tunnel. As I moved forward, the symbols etched into the walls shifted subtly in my periphery. I stopped walking at one point, staring directly at one. It was an Ouroboros, a snake eating its tail, but segmented into 12 parts, each labeled in a forgotten dialect. Each segment pulsed softly. Each had a name carved beneath it. One name glowed faintly. Mine. Before I could process the meaning, The tunnel opened into a small chamber, circular, lined with robes. Crimson, gold, and black. At the center stood a stone pedestal. On it rested an old manuscript, bound in something that looked unsettlingly like stretched skin, sealed with Vatican wax. Next to the pedestal stood a man in full ceremonial regalia. White gloves, silver cuffs, a black robe stitched with threads of iron. His face was old but alert, his eyes cold and precise. He didn't seem surprised to see me. "You've made it farther than most," he said. I asked him what this place was. He gestured to the walls. "This is the sanctum of the Gilded Cage, the order tasked with maintaining divine containment. We are archivists of heaven's mistakes." He tapped the manuscript. "That room you found, that's the cage house. Those things inside aren't angels anymore. They're fragments. Remnants of divine will stripped from their source and left to rot." I asked why they were locked away. "Because not even the Vatican knows how to kill them. And every few decades, one tries to escape." I asked what happened then. His voice lowered. "Then we send in a vessel." I froze. I remembered the angel's words. "You are the first to come without a leash." I wasn't supposed to be here. Not alone. He saw the look on my face and smirked. "You opened cage 9, didn't you?" I nodded. He didn't react. He just closed the manuscript and said, "Then you've already begun the ritual. God help you." Behind me, the tunnel closed. The old man motioned me toward a small wooden chair carved with runes I didn't recognize. I didn't sit. Something inside me recoiled at the idea, like whatever was now fused to me knew what that seat meant. He noticed my hesitation. "You've already invited it in," he said, adjusting the cuffs on his ceremonial robe. "You may not realize it, but your body is no longer wholly yours." I demanded answers. What was in cage 9? What did it want? He smiled, not with amusement, but with sadness. "That was one of the seraphim remnants. Fragmented light. It doesn't think the way we do. It doesn't speak in time. You didn't open the door. You completed the pact." A clicking noise echoed from the ceiling, not mechanical, but organic. Something was moving above us. Slowly. Deliberately. I tensed. He noticed. "You hear it now, don't you?" I nodded. "Good. That means the connection is stabilizing. That sound is the first layer of awareness, the part of the entity that mirrors you. It's learning how to be you." My mouth went dry. I asked what that meant for me. He opened a small drawer in the pedestal and withdrew a parchment. It was covered in drawings, anatomical sketches of people with extra limbs, second mouths under their ribs, faces growing in reverse. "Some vessels don't last," he said. "Some are reshaped by the angel's nature. Others fracture, become something in between." I stared at the drawings, horrified. My vision blurred slightly at the edges. My reflection in the polished surface of the wall shimmered, and for a moment, I swore I saw a second pair of eyes behind my own. "You still have time," he said, more urgently now. "If you come willingly, the Order of the Gilded Cage can prepare you for containment. But the longer you wait..." He didn't finish. From above, something fell, not physically, but in feeling. A weight. A sudden awareness. I could feel it inside me, the fragment from cage 9. It wasn't angry. It was curious, testing the limits of my skin. My thoughts were no longer linear. I remembered memories I didn't have. A war in a sky that burned with inverted suns. A cathedral floating on wings of broken hymns. I staggered. The man took a step back. "It's accelerating. You're resisting. That won't hold for long." He handed me a small relic, a crucifix forged from bone and gold, still warm to the touch. "This is an anchor. It won't save you, but it will remind you of what you are when the time comes." I asked him what I had become. He looked at me with something close to pity. "You're a vessel. For something divine. Or something that used to be." Sleep became impossible. Not because of fear. I could have endured that. But because each time I closed my eyes, I saw lives that weren't mine. Cities built into the spines of mountains, oceans made entirely of wings, and a voice that echoed across dimensions. It whispered riddles in a language that tasted like copper and light. I began writing them down, compulsively. My journal filled with glyphs, pages soaked in ink and blood when my hands trembled too much to hold the pen steady. The Vatican priests called it the uncaged memory, the point when the entity no longer hides behind symbols or dreams. It's remembering through you, one whispered as I sat in the candlelit observation room. Not speaking, not haunting, remembering. I had no anchor to reality anymore. People spoke to me and their voices fractured into harmonic layers. One priest, Father Salvi, reached out to comfort me, and I saw his bones glow through his skin, etched with names I had never heard but somehow knew I had once spoken. That's when the marks began. First on my shoulder, a tiny crack that glowed faintly under moonlight. Then across my ribs, a line of burning text that shifted every night. Sometimes it bled. Sometimes it whispered. I stopped wearing mirrors. My reflection lagged behind. Once, it blinked when I didn't. The old man, whose name I still wasn't allowed to speak aloud, said I was progressing too quickly. He showed me a page from a forbidden text, the Codex Reversum, a manual written centuries ago by a previous vessel who died before completing the transformation. The seraphim fragments have a pattern, he said. They begin with memory, then reshape the vessel through memory. If you don't ground yourself, you won't survive the next phase. I asked what the next phase was. Convergence, he said. You and it become indistinguishable. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part, the part that felt ancient, stretched, and filled with song, wanted to let go. That part told me I had once been something more. Not human. Not angel. But a boundary. A watcher between realms. That night, I received a letter. No envelope. Just parchment, left on my bed. Written in the same glowing ink as the marks on my body. We are almost ready. One more memory must return. The cage was not a prison. It was a door. I stared at it until dawn, my hands trembling. That phrase repeated in my head over and over. The cage was not a prison. It was a door. And I was the key. I wasn't allowed back into the lower levels. They told me it was for my safety, and the safety of others. The Vatican had protocols for entities in transition, and I had officially crossed the threshold. No longer just a man. Not yet something else. But I couldn't stay away. Every breath I took in the upper halls felt diluted, artificial. My ears rang with a melody only I could hear, a distant humming that grew louder near stone, louder still near candlelight, and nearly deafening when I passed the old confessionals. I started hearing them at night. Voices layered on top of each other. Not speaking words, but weaving tones, frequencies that bent thought. It wasn't singing in the way humans understood it. It was remembering through vibration. That's what the choir was. Echoes of angels that had been caged, voices once divine now disembodied, trapped within the marble bones of the building itself. The hollow choir. Father Salvi met me in the sanctuary, kneeling at the altar but facing away from the crucifix. His hands trembled as he clutched a rosary made of bone. "They're waking because of you," he whispered. "Do you understand what that means?" I nodded, even though I didn't. They were never prisoners. The cages held their forms, yes, but their songs still echoed. That's what sanctified the stone. Why this place feels holy. It's not God. It's containment. I asked him what would happen if I listened too long. "You won't be you anymore," he said. "You'll become a note in the choir." That night, I couldn't sleep. Instead, I wandered. Not consciously. My feet moved on their own. Down past the archives, past the catacombs that hadn't been used in centuries. Deeper still, past doors with rusted Vatican seals and warnings carved in Enochian script. There, beneath the chapel, I found them. Not the cages. Not the angels. The ones who had listened too long. They sat in circles. Dozens of them. Priests, scribes, even children. Eyes white. Skin cracked with light. Mouths open but unmoving. They pulsed softly with rhythm, not breathing, but resonating. Each one singing just one note. Not with air, but with presence. Together, they formed the hollow choir. They didn't move. But they felt me. My skull vibrated. My ribs twisted. I fell to my knees, clutching my head as a dozen memories bled into my mind at once. Memories of flight, of fire, of being unseen and eternal. I felt my own name peel away. Felt language collapse into color. I saw myself as they saw me. A chord unfinished. A hymn waiting for the last note. The door at the back of the chamber cracked open. A voice, or maybe just a thought, called me forward. You opened the cage. Now you must finish the song. The door closed behind me without a sound. The chamber I entered was circular, carved from obsidian black stone etched with sigils too old for Latin. There was no light source, yet everything glowed faintly, as if the air itself remembered light and mimicked it. At the center stood the ninth cage. It was different from the others. Instead of silver bars, it was made from a lattice of gold-veined bone and scorched feathers, held together by invisible pressure. The space inside seemed deeper than the room should allow, as if it extended into another reality entirely. There was no angel inside. But something was returning. I felt it before I saw it. A weight on my chest. A pressure in my skull. My blood hummed with its approach. One by one, the tones of the hollow choir shifted, not louder, but aligned. They became a chord waiting for resolution, a final note to complete the melody of a prison-turned hymn. And that note was me. My body moved without consent, walking to the center. The cage opened not with sound but with memory, a vision of ancient flame, of language that split the sky, of a being torn from the stars and buried beneath scripture. The thing inside had no form. It was form. Wings that weren't wings. Eyes that weren't eyes. Its presence peeled back my senses like wet parchment. But it wasn't angry. It was waiting. It had been for a long time. I realized what I had done. When I opened the first cage, I hadn't freed an angel. I had started a recall. A summoning. This chamber wasn't for keeping one imprisoned. It was a vessel, the last component of a divine weapon, broken and buried beneath ritual, faith, and fear. And I was the key they had waited for. A bloodline rooted in prophecy. A soul shaped to resonate with the imprisoned song. The Vatican hadn't built this room. They had inherited it. The original church, the one before Peter, before Christ, before names, had bound something not to protect us from it, but to protect it from what was coming. I stepped into the cage. Not because I was told to. Because I understood. The choir behind me crescendoed. Not in agony, in harmony. As I took my place in the center, the presence wrapped around me like fireless heat, embedding itself in the cracks I didn't know I had. My spine arched. My vision split into memories of people I'd never been. I screamed, but the sound came out as music. A ninth note joined the eight. And in that moment, that one terrifying, sacred moment, I heard what they had been building toward for centuries. A weapon in the form of a song. A warning sung in reverse. A name spoken forward that would unmake everything false. The walls cracked. The cage shattered. The choir went silent. And from the depths of the earth, something ancient and watching finally answered back.